Here are 10 nutritional myths that you might think are true but are not. Hi there, my name is Miguel Yalouridis. I know my surname is hard to pronounce. It's Greek, and I'm a certified personal trainer, vegan nutritionist, and a coach. I've been vegan for 9 years and I've trained hundreds of people on a one-to-one basis in the past couple of years. So let's get into it. Myth number 1. Eating a high-carb meal is bad because of the glucose spike. This usually comes from people who are afraid to eat fruits, who are telling you that white rice is bad, that oats are bad, that any type of whole grain is bad essentially. Now we need to understand, is a glucose spike a bad thing? Not necessarily. What matters most is how your body responds to that glucose spike, how often that happens, and what are the foods causing that glucose spike. Additionally, are you at high risk of diabetes? Or are you a healthy individual overall, at a healthy weight, who exercises regularly, and doesn't have the genetic predispositions for diabetes? If you tick all those boxes, you don't need to buy any of those glucose monitors or worry about your glucose, as long as you do a blood test every year, let's say. If you're somebody who is at risk of diabetes, has pre-diabetes, or has type 1 or type 2 diabetes, that's a whole other story, and I'm not your guy to answer that question because I'm not an expert in that field. So carbohydrates are completely fine as long as you are not in that group of people. Now the source of the carbohydrates of course matters. A donut is not the same as oatmeal, but what's more important here is what your overall diet looks like. If 80% of it comes from whole foods such as bean, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some tofu maybe, or if you're not vegan, let's say some eggs, some fish or some meat or poultry in addition to those foods I mentioned, and those food makes the majority of your diet, then what you eat for 10 or 20% of the time doesn't really matter. Which brings me to myth number 2, processed foods are bad. Processed foods is an umbrella term that covers so many different foods, from really health promoting foods such as oats and canned beans and frozen vegetables to ultra processed foods such as donuts or ice cream or pizza or cookies. So when somebody says processed foods is bad, they're an idiot, because they don't know what that means. And you can ask them, well, which specific processed food is that you're talking about and what exactly are the health outcomes of eating that food? Then watch them stare at you like this with no answer. Health promoting processed foods are things such as tofu, unsweetened soy milk, unsweetened soy yogurt, tempeh, extra virgin olive oil, fine oats, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, sourdough bread, canned beans, peanut butter, tahini, 70% dark chocolate. You have so many healthy processed foods. And ultra processed foods, so usually things like frozen pizza, donuts, ready meals, cookies, french fries, deep fried food in general, those things you definitely want to limit. So no, processed foods aren't bad. Certain ultra-processed foods that are really rich in calories, sugar or fat should be minimized. Myth number 3, seed oils are bad for you and cause inflammation in the body. This is a claim that's been used mostly by people in the keto or carnivore crowd. If you look at the data, seed oils actually are neutral or even improve inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein, especially when they're substituted by saturated rich fat foods such as dairy, butter, ghee, tallow, red meat, or even coconut oil, whereas things like sunflower oil, olive oil, sesame oil are better for your heart. So if somebody tells you seed oils are inflammatory, tell them which exact type of oil, which inflammatory markers, by how much, and compare to what. And again, see them stare at you with dead eyes and an open mouth, not knowing what to say. Myth number 4, soy will lower your testosterone levels. I don't think that's true. Well, I'm just one example though, and it doesn't matter what happens to me. What matters are the studies that show that soy doesn't have any effect on reproductive hormones in men. And it's even protective against breast cancer in women. Not to mention, things like tofu or tempeh are high in protein, really low in saturated fat, contain some fiber, tons of calcium and iron. I consider that a superfood. So you can't compare a firm tofu, unsweetened soy milk or tempeh with a processed food rich in soybean oil, for example. So again, when you say soy, it's just an umbrella term. Ask them which exact type of soy product are you referring to, and where are the studies showing that soy lowers testosterone levels. Myth number 5, oats are bad for you because they're heavily sprayed with pesticides. The benefits of eating non-organic oats, or non-organic fruits and vegetables for that matter, significantly outweigh any minimal potential risk of pesticide exposure. I've done a post on this on Instagram even recently, showing that you have to eat several kilos of oats per day to even reach the limit intake of glyphosate. So unless you're consuming 10 kilo of oats like a horse every day, you don't have to worry about this. If you're eating a small portion of like half cup or 1 cup of oats every day, that's only going to be good for you, even if it's a non-organic oat product. Because oats are rich in fiber, low in saturated fat, and they really help in terms of your overall health, lowering cholesterol, blood pressure, you name it. Oats are again a superfood. Myth number 6, beans, oats, nuts, vegetables are bad for you because they contain so-called anti-nutrients, such as lectins or phytic acid. We have tons of studies showing that when you cook your beans, I don't know anybody who's eating raw beans or raw rice. When you cook your beans, your whole grains, or you soak them overnight before cooking them, that significantly reduces the amount of phytic acid or tannins or lectins. So when we look at foods, we shouldn't pick one mechanism or one compound found in those foods and immediately jump into any conclusions. So oats, yes, they are sprayed with pesticides. Yes, they contain anti-nutrients, which can inhibit calcium and iron absorption. But when you look at studies of people actually eating oats on a daily basis for years, they have lowered LDL cholesterol, they have better blood pressure, they are not overweight, and they live longer. And that's what you should be focusing on, not on these fear-mongering videos you see online. Myth number 7, you need 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight to build muscle. But again, I'm a living example here of eating way less than that and building muscle non-stop for the past 15 years. But again, I'm just one example and that doesn't matter. We have studies again showing us that 1.2 up to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is more than enough to induce muscle protein synthesis and build as much muscle as possible. If you're eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, you're just peeing out all that excess protein and you're just making your grocery list more expensive. If you're somebody like me who weighs 80 kilos or 175 pounds, correct me if I'm wrong, then you roughly need 100 to 120 grams of protein per day and you're good to go. Myth number 8, you can't build muscle as a vegan. Here, I'm going to definitely show my example because it's a good one. Because if that was a fact, I wouldn't be building more muscle than before. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your diet is. If you're resistance training consistently every single week, progressively overloading the resistance in the gym or at home or wherever you train, you eat sufficient calories, sufficient protein, you're going to build muscle. Simple as that. Myth number 9, you need to eat more protein as a vegan because the plant-based protein sources are inferior to animal-based ones. Well, we actually have a really cool, interesting recent study that shows that plant protein is as effective as animal protein in terms of building muscle. Of course, if you're vegan and you're not incorporating things like protein powder or tofu or tempeh or seitan or even certain vegan meat substitutes, it can be a little bit harder to get enough protein from things like beans or grains or nuts and seeds alone. So if you're serious about training and you want to build as much muscle as possible and get as strong as possible, then I think eating tofu every single day and or a good quality plant protein powder is going to really help you bump up your protein for the day. Myth number 10, gluten is inflammatory. If somebody tells you this, simply ask them the following. Which foods are you referring to? Which inflammatory markers do they raise? And by how much? Because gluten, again, contains health-promoting foods such as whole rye, whole barley, or whole wheat, as well as ultra-processed foods such as donuts made of refined wheat flour. So which one are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense to call gluten inflammatory because whole grain consumption actually reduces inflammatory markers against such as C-reactive protein and others. And unless you're celiac or you have a gluten intolerance, personally I don't see any reason why you should avoid gluten. If you stuck around all the way till the end, thank you for watching, and if you want more YouTube videos, longer format like these ones, let me know in the comments below. Talk to you next time.